Hello, everybody, and welcome to the new episode of the music ranking, reviewing, and rating podcast that we like to call Music Meltdown. This episode, I have occasional guest Rich Latta here. We're going to be discussing winner of the first ever, second poll that I've done for this channel, being The Strokes. It's a 2000s indie poll. They ended up beating over Interpol, Arctic Monkeys, Yeah Yeah Yeahs, and Vampire Weekend. They had 5 votes, and that was enough. So be sure to join the Discord server to act in more of those. That being said, this was a band that I knew the discography very thoroughly well. Some of these records would have been maybe my 4th, 5th time listening, if that. Others, just my 2nd time. I won't really give away which part of the discography I knew the most, but I will say my list is very untraditional. This might be my most controversial one to date. And if you saw television, not having Marky Moon at number 1 is about as controversial as you can get. So that'll be fun.
Boy.
Let's throw it on over to Rich. Tell me what your familiarity was with this group.
Yeah, I'm a fan of the Strokes. I was there when they first hit the scene and blew up. I remember all the hype surrounding them. You know, they were hailed as the saviors of rock and roll. I do think they're one of the coolest bands ever. And they seem like cool people in real life too. So yeah, I'm psyched to do the Strokes. I think it's going to be a love fest, or at least on my end.
uh sure, buddy. Uh I'll give full disclosure. I thought that I liked the Strokes more than I did before starting this.
Oh
There's some
boy.
clunkers for me, but yeah. Overall though, I like this group. I like Julian Casablancas a good bit. I listened to his record Virtue with the Voids in
Yeah.
2018, and I think that one's quite good as well. A little bit more experimental, maybe a little bit closer to my taste. But it is a 2000s indie rock. This is my bullshit that I can pull out whenever I want. That being said, however,
It's your
just the
turn to go
first.
first.
That
So,
is correct. And first, indeed, because the first record I'm talking about is First Impressions of Earth. And I'm going to be brutally honest, I just don't like this record. I think it's an overlong mess by a band that wanted to grow, but just simply had no idea where they were doing. Most of it just ends up sounding like a scattered, obnoxious mess of the previous 2 Strokes records. Despite that, however, it somehow ends up starting relatively well with the stretch from You Only Live Once to Heart in a Cage. And I think Fear of Sleep is also pretty good. But for the most part, this record is just an incredibly overthought, boring listen without any of their top songs to go to. And even in some of the better songs, like I think it's Juice Box, it's just incredibly annoying. This record, at least to me, whenever I was looking back through the songs that I liked, it seems really loud for whatever reason. Maybe that was just me. Maybe I was listening a little bit higher than I should have been, but it just seems like a really bad record to me. I have it at 2 stars. I don't think that it's very good, and it's just way too long, and that's the bottom line for me. Just highly not recommended.
I had a feeling that you were going to put that one at the bottom. I just had a feeling about that. So anyway, my bottom number 6 is Come Down Machine from 2013, their 5th album. My bottom 3 were really difficult to place. They're all about equal. I chose Come Down Machine because it doesn't have any 5-star songs for me, although it has a couple that come close. Um, let's see. It has one of the few songs that go below 3 stars for me, and that is Partners in Crime, which I find light, sing-songy, and mildly annoying. The album sounds good to me, though. I think it's one of their heavier albums. Julian Casablanca sings in falsetto on some of the songs, and I think he can really pull that off. Sounds good. They continue to experiment with synths here. One Way Trigger sounds a lot like Tinkly Bonk synth pop, almost silly sounding. And Julian employs some falsetto on that one as well. Um, 80s Come Down Machine is kind of a downer synth song. It has electronic beats, and there's a mellotron played by Nick Valenci. Nick is usually the lead guitarist and does most of the guitar solos on Stroke songs, and they're pretty much always great. The final track is very good, sounding something like lounge jazz until it slides into some sort of blues march at the end. When I first heard this album, I didn't hear any of the catchiness that I had heard on their previous albums, but it does reward repeated listens, and most of the songs have revealed themselves to be very good. I've got this at 4 stars.
Yeah, very, very strong disagreements.
Uh oh.
But yeah, I'll talk about that record eventually.
All
I
right.
mean, eventually. My number five, this is the record that like I had it way, way higher my last time through. I actually had this at my number three, but it incredibly dropped upon this listening. Talking about their newest, the new Abnormal. This record has really fallen from grace for me. This time around, I just found it kind of boring. Reminds me a decent bit of the late 90s, early 2000s Flaming Lips records, has a decent bit of that neo psychedelic aspects to it, but I just think that it lacks the highs of those other records and other Strokes records. And especially if I'm comparing it to something like American Head by the Flaming Lips from this year, which I think does something very similar to the style, just dramatically better. For the most part, I don't think this is a bad record. I just think that it's really inessential and it lacks a lot of what makes the band really special to me. I have it at 2.5 stars. And to point out, I don't think that Julian Casablancas is a bad singer. I think that he has a very good falsetto. On this record, he sounds absolutely hoarse. He is, I don't know what's wrong with the vocals across this record, but I just think that he sounds terrible, really, front to back.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, my number five is also the new Abnormal. The most recent album from 2020. I didn't notice. I don't recall thinking his voice sounded bad in any way. Um, I found it to be an interesting album. It's got more electronic percussion and some intriguing sounds, especially guitar sounds. Um, there's only 9 tracks, but the songs tend to be on the longer side, around the 5 or 6 minute mark. Of particular note is the excellent Eternal Summer, which is a great protest song against humanity's failure to take action against global warming. The song is slightly funky, and Julian's falsetto sounds great. I love the way the guitar kind of screams when Julian sings, "They got the remedy, but they won't let it happen." At the Door is devoid of percussion and has a guitar that sounds like a synth. It's kind of a weird little thing that they do sometimes. Uh, Julian sounds really emotional on this one, and it gets my vote for best track on the album. Also of note is the last track, Ode to the Mets. I love the way it fools you into thinking it's going to be a synth pop song. The synth at the beginning is soon obliterated by a guitar that comes in and does something completely different. I thought that was pretty cool. On a side note, I'm not crazy about the cover artwork. It's called Bird on Money by Jean Michel Basquiat. I'm not a Basquiat fan, but the album itself is very good. It's another 4 stars.
Yeah, it's a strong disagreement for me. The art is like my favorite thing about the record. I think that the cover is awesome. I think it also, I think that it came on like trans. I'm not 100% sure, but I think at the vinyl, it came in like a clear sleeve and you just immediately saw the art through that. I could be totally wrong about that, but I think I saw a video and it was really cool. But yeah, I also kind of wish that they stuck with synth pop because they were better at that. Moving up from here, I'm talking about Angles. Record's fine. They broke up for a short period after First Impressions of Earth, and they came back with a generally speaking competent record, experimenting a bit with 80s pop and new wave elements. It's not the direction that you would expect them to go, but I think it plays out relatively well, especially on the opener Machu Picchu. There's a notably bad song as well, being You're So Right. But a decent chunk of the record past that, it's just sort of decent. It has the occasional highlight, but overall, it just sort of goes by and doesn't really last with too much impact for me. I have it at 3 stars, but we're gradually going up.
Okay, very gradually. I don't know how happy Strokes fans are going to be with you, but okay. Um, yeah, Angles isn't one of the more popular ones anyway. It's also my number four. It's their fourth album from 2011. Um, I really wanted to place this one higher. It's got the strongest opening 3 tracks of any Strokes record, in my opinion. Unfortunately, that high bar is not maintained throughout the rest of the album. The opening track, Machu Picchu, has a slight Caribbean flavor, while the second track, Under Cover of Darkness, is definitely one of their best songs. It's so addictive, really gets stuck in my head. The chorus sounds so cool and strangely moving, and I love the little breakdown in there too. Third song, Two Kinds of Happiness, starts off kind of new wave, kind of Tom Petty. Then it explodes at the chorus, and there's a killer guitar solo in there too. Taken for a Fool is another 5 star banger, while Games dives into electronica synth pop land, more addictive bass lines there. Disappointingly, the rest of the album can't match the previous songs I mentioned. And the last track is my least favorite song on any Strokes album. But what's good here is strong enough to elevate the rating, and the ranking still at 4 stars.
Okay, to be fair, I think that most Strokes fans are kind of fine with me having First Impressions of Earth down low. I kind of hear most people think of that record kind of sucks a bit. I think New Abnormal, both of us are gonna get chewed on. That record was fucking adored by everybody. So you obviously less so, considering you gave it 4 stars, and I believe for you that's very good. So regardless, this is where certain people within the community that we know, especially get upset with me because Come Down Machine is my number 3, by far my most controversial placing on this. But this is a massive step up. I love this record, but I can admit that there's plenty of flaws that do leave it down at a 4 star for me. But I think this is such a bounce back from the previous 2 Strokes records that were just so boring and derivative to me. It feels like they're having fun again on this record to me. It experiments way heavier with different trends of 80s synth pop, and Julian's voice fits it shockingly well. The double guitar attack as well really helps to beef up the sound. I agree with you that it's one of their heaviest. It has their like noisiest guitar tones. Almost feels like something you would see off of a Voids record. And I think that's incredibly interesting. And by far, this record has the group's strongest hooks, in my opinion. Just like the strongest chorus game and just immediate hooks that'll grab you. Tap Out, One Way Trigger, Welcome to Japan, Partners in Crime, and Happy Ending are just such earworms, in my opinion. I think this is a really great record. And while it's a total step away from Is This It, in many ways, I would say it's just as equally interesting to me. High 4 stars for Come Down Machine. Pretty dramatic step forward for me.
All right. Very cool. Very cool. We both have the same rating. Um, so my number 3 is Room on Fire, which I'm guessing is your number 1. I think I got wind of that on Discord. I'm not sure though. Um, So it's their second album, came out in 2003. I think this album can fairly be considered Is This It version 2.0. The songs are completely different, but the approach is the same. The band tried to use producer Nigel Godrich of Radiohead fame, but aborted the sessions in favor of returning to Gordon Raphael, who produced the first album. Room on Fire starts off strong with Julian singing that he wants to be forgotten. Not much chance of that happening, Julian, not anytime soon. The next song, Reptilia, is merely good. But after that, we get Automatic Stop, which is supremely catchy and cool. Love that addictive chorus. 1251 is interesting the way the guitars sound like a keyboard. They're doing that trick. This might be the first time they did it. Um, it's a little bit sing-songy, but Julian is one of the few singers that can pull off sing-songy for me and make it sound cool. But Between Love and Hate, so cool. I love the way that melodic bass comes in at the second stanza. I think the second side is even stronger than the first. I love the jazz chords on Under Control, and the way it is just sounds badass. Um, the album ends on a high note with I Can't Win. Uh, this is an excellent album, and I flirted with giving it 5 stars, and I almost did. I'm so close. Um, but I think I'm going to stick with 4.5 stars. It's almost as good as the debut, but only slightly diminished returns.
Yeah, no, it's better. It's their best. Number two is this it. Um, yeah, it's a really great debut record. Just from the opener alone, is this it? You can really tell the band was going to be something really special. Sadly, this the only misstep for me on this record, and be kind of controversial, is the following track. I'm not that big on the modern age, but everything after that I think is just supremely great. Soma is delightful. I love Someday and Last Night. I adore the synth part and Hard to Explain. I think that it makes it clearly stick out as my favorite song on the record. New York City Quaps is Quaps. The hell's a Quap? New York City Cops, an equally undeniable fun track. The Strokes have a really interesting blend of 2000s indie rock and the garage rock revival that was happening at that time. And by far, they're the best band of the garage rock revival. Maybe if you want to include them, you could say like Black Rebel Motorcycle Club, but I wouldn't say that. They borrow too much from like a Jesus and Mary chain, like a Stone Roses vein and their noise elements to really call them in that regard. And Strokes fucking blow the water out of White Stripes. But anyways, this record only really works just because of how excellent Julian Casablancas is. His incredibly recognizable voice, almost like a modern day Lou Reed in some elements. It's a really great album. It's a classic of the 2000s. I have it at 4.5 stars. But yeah, I'm sorry, man. You're wrong. Room on Fire is better. Deal with it.
Okay, well, first I got to deal with my number two, which is First Impressions of Earth,
Thank
their
goodness.
third album from 2005. And you're right, I do remember that there was some backlash about this album. It wasn't as well received. Um, but I really, really wanted to put this as my number one. I almost did. Um, I think the songs here achieve a newfound fluidity, and I think the band improved as musicians by this point. Um, the songs offer more variety, and I think this is the Strokes at their heaviest. The main thing holding it back from the top spot, though, is that at 14 tracks, the album does feel too long. Um, I've got nothing against long albums, double albums. Uh, there's no song on The Cure's Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me that I want left off. I think you need every song on Pink Floyd's The Wall. Um, but it's a different situation when it's just a collection of a bunch of pop songs. And that's what we have here. I think they could have tightened up the album by leaving off the last two tracks. That's what I would have done. Um, that's not to say they are bad songs at all. They're actually pretty great. Um, but the penultimate track is quite laid back and causes the album to lose steam a bit by that point. Um, the song before that, Eyes of the World, would have been an amazing closer, especially with its stunningly abrupt ending. That's an amazing song. But this album is loaded with five-star songs, including the opener, You Only Live Once. Spoiler alert, that's my favorite Stroke song. I love the descending guitar line when Julian sings, I'll Come Down, kind of a so good. Juicebox builds a song around the Peter Gunn theme by Henry Mancini. It's pretty intense. Razor Blade is great. It's kind of sing-songy, but like I said, Julian is so cool, he gets away with it. Vision of Division has a really cool Middle Eastern sounding guitar solo while the band is crashing around it. Ask Me Anything is pretty interesting. Nick Valenci plays Mellotron on it, and I think that's the only instrument happening besides Julian's voice. It's a very melancholy song. Julian sings I've Got Nothing to Say over and over, which I actually think says a lot. 15 minutes sounds kind of like a sea shanty that transforms into a fast rocker. The vocals remind me of Leonard Cohen. It's like a familiar sounding melody that I can't place and it's driving me nuts. Um, I flirted with giving this album 4.5 stars because it just feels a little too long, but it's a great collection of songs and none of them are under 4 stars. So I'm giving the album 5 stars.
Okay, you shouldn't have just flirted. You should have fucking married her. But and speaking of better records, Curious Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, you can definitely cut The Perfect Girl. Like from the last time I remember listening, that song
Oh,
like
no way. That should have been a single. You're
yes, a
crazy.
non-album single. But
Oh,
yeah, last time I remember listening to the record, that one didn't do a ton for me. But
oh.
you like The Cure a little bit more than myself, so I'll leave you to that one. I'll leave me to my indie bullshit. But you've evidently proven yourself to be a much bigger Strokes fan than I, as my number one is Room on Fire, and this isn't even my 2003 album of the year anymore. This record dropped down to a 4.5 for me. It's been taken over by Elbows, Cast of Thousands, really great post pop record, highly recommended. But yeah, I've always liked Room on Fire a good deal more than Is This It. Uh, I listened to both of them the same day, and while they're definitely closer than I used to think that they were, this is still by far my favorite of the two. I just think it has more interesting songs. Uh, they very much follow similar templates of what a standard stroke song is, and it's not a bad thing. But I think it limits the overall impact that both these records can end up having for me. But once again, like I've said, this record just has the higher highs. Reptilia is amazing. Automatic Stop is incredibly interesting. Under Control is probably their best song, and The End Is No End is my favorite. It's 4.5 stars. Like I said, I think it's a great record, but yeah, just for whatever reason, I wasn't as strongly about these records as I was the last time I heard them. I still think that the Strokes are a very good band, but before this, I felt confident they'd be somewhere on my top 30 all time. They might not even make my top 50 anymore.
Wow. Okay. Well, I think one thing you could say is they're maybe a little bit limited compared to some other bands. Um, I don't know. I just think a lot of their tunes are so addictive. Um, anyway, my number one is This It from 2001, the debut. Um, This album has crackling youthful energy and a certain spark that just makes it so cool. But the album actually starts off in a rather lackadaisical manner with the title track, Julian sounding kind of like a slacker. Um, I love when the bass comes in, so melodic. This is one of those great albums where, for the most part, every song sounds better than the one that came before it. Um, the second song, The Modern Age, has some Velvet Underground style propulsion, and the vocals recall Lou Reed somewhat. The Velvets were an obvious influence on the Strokes, uh, probably no more obvious than on that song. Barely Legal. Oh, I love that one. Supremely catchy, beyond cool. I love the opening lines. I didn't take no shortcut. I spent the money that I saved up. Oh, mama running out of luck. And like my sister don't give a fuck. And then when that sweeping chorus comes in, it sounds so great. Um, Definitely a top 10 song for me. Someday is a bit too jaunty for my tastes, but the Strokes pull it off in spades. Last Night, hard to explain, more five-star songs. New York City Cops is another five-star song, but it was replaced on the American version of the album out of respect for the police officers who died on 9/11, just a month or two before the album was released, or released right around that same time. Can't remember, but it had the line "New York City cops ain't too smart," um, which isn't really a cool thing to put out there after 9/11. So they made the right decision. But it was actually a good protest song against police brutality. So um, in its place, they put When It Started, which is another five-star song. It's just fucking addictive, really sticks in my skull. Um, it's borderline sing-songy, but it's just too weird and cool to be annoying. Catchy as hell. Then Take It or Leave It closes the album out with another five-star song. Yeah, this is just a classic to me. Um, my number one Strokes album, 5 stars. Is this it?
Yeah, I mean, can't sit here and act like you're wrong. Like on pretty much every metric, if I were to judge objectively, you are probably correct. But yeah, meh.
Well,
I don't know.
there's no such thing as objectivity when it comes to opinions about music, unless there's a
I agree.
God. Maybe if there was a God, he could say, okay, this is objectively better than that, and that would be the final word. But seen no sign of him, so I'm going to assume,
As of yet,
as of yet.
maybe somebody's laying in plain sight. I don't know. That being said, decided to mix things up a bit with songs. I just kind of listed my favorites from each of the records. I'm just going to run through chronologically and say my favorite and my honorable mention. From the debut record, Is This It? My favorite track is Hard to Explain, with my runner-up being Last Night. From Room on Fire, my favorite is Under Control, with the runner-up being Reptilia. First Impression of Earth, it was difficult to get two from, but the best one is You Only Live Once. At least we agree there. And Heart in a Cage. From Angles, the best song is by far Machu Picchu, and the next song is Call Me Back. From Come Down Machine, the best songs are One Way Trigger and Call It Fate, Call It Karma. And the only two songs worth a damn on the New Abnormal are Ode to the Mets and Brooklyn's Bridge to Chorus.
Okay, cool. I guess I'll do mine. I'd also like to do my top 10 real quick at the end, but my favorite songs on each album. For the first one, Is This It? My favorite song is Barely Legal. My second favorite would be When It Started, but that's the one on the American album. So if that one doesn't count, I'll go with Last Night. For Room on Fire, I've got Automatic Stop, Runner up is Whatever Happened. First Impressions of Earth, I've got You Only Live Once. And the runner up is Eyes of the World. For angles, I've got Undercover of Darkness. Runner up Machu Picchu. For Come Down Machine, I've got 80s Come Down Machine. And the runner up is Happy Ending. For the new abnormal, I've got At the Door, a melancholy song with guitars that sound like synths. And my runner up is Why Are Sundays So Depressing? So, real quick, my top 10. Number 10, Machu Picchu from Angles. Number 9, Killing Lies from First Impressions of Earth. Number 8, New York City Cops from Is This It? Number 7, Last Night from Is This It? Number 6, Automatic Stop from Room on Fire. Number 5, Eyes of the World from First Impressions of Earth. Number 4, When It Started, Is This It? Number 3, Barely Legal, Is This It? Number 2, Undercover of Darkness, Angles. And number 1, You Only Live Once, First Impressions of Earth.
Okay. Seems like if I were to have actually made a list, there would have been a little bit of overlap there. At the very least, we agree the songs that are the best come from Come Down Machine, so that's cool. That being said, however, um,
I forgot to mention, I sort of saw them. I moved to Austin in 2010, and the Strokes were playing Austin City Limits, and I heard their music coming across the water, and it was all distorted and shit, but it still sounded badass. I was like, oh, that would be a great concert to be at.
if anything, part of me feels like that might be an even cool sort of way to listen to them as opposed to just hearing them directly.
Yeah, it
I don't
was
know.
cool. I hung out and listened.
Yeah, Strokes are a weird band because it's like I don't know why they're weird. I just think that they're weird. They're cool though. I like them.
I got a
Uh,
question for you. Do you like them more than Spoon?
that's tricky. Spoon are definitely way more consistent, but Spoon are way more consistent. But I like my top three Strokes records probably more than all 10 Spoon records. Well, not Come Down Machine. I like Come Down Machine less than my top three Spoon. I think it comes down to it because I didn't bring this up, but it took me a while to get into Julian Casablancas' voice. Just something he has like this weird I don't even know how to describe it, like roughness to his voice, like really just like raspiness. And it's not bad, very indicative of Lou Reed. I just think I don't know, just his voice is the main thing that kind of has always sort of turned me away. I think he fits voids way better personally as a vocalist.
Yeah, it's funny. My I played some Strokes for my friend, and he immediately was turned off by the voice and said, "This
Yeah.
sounds like any drunken joker at the karaoke bar." He thought his
Well,
voice was totally not special.
I mean, he's right. I don't know. I don't quite know off the top of my head because I think I might slightly prefer Spoon just because I really value consistency in my discographies and past the two Spoon records that you somehow really like, I think that they're a very consistent band. Um, I don't know. They don't have a bad record. I can definitively say that I think that the Strokes have a bad record, and that
Okay.
I guess that's kind of what separates them for me. But they're both kind of like B tier in that sort of indie rock 2000s thing. Give me a Wilco, give me a fucking Flaming Lips from that era. Give me a bunch of different bands first. At least is kind of where I go.
All right, fair
But
enough.
but I can't deny their influence out of the bands that were on the poll, as I mentioned them earlier, being Vampire Weekend, Interpol, Yeah Yeah Yeahs, and Arctic Monkeys. They probably they probably have the highest highs of any of those bands. I don't know any Yeah Yeah Yeahs, so I could love that stuff. Probably not, given what I've seen are their descriptors. I assume that I'm not in love with them, but they seem cool
I'm
on their own
crazy
set.
about their first two albums. I love
Interesting.
the Yeah Yeah Yeah's first two albums quite a bit.
Nice. I'm excited to do that one because they're on the schedule for I think April. I have them set for.
Oh, okay. And their new one is really good too, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I heard.
I'd love to join in on that one.
Yeah, for sure. I think Clay really liked the debut as well. Not the debut, the new one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, a lot of big things coming up next year. It's going to be a real fun one. Hope that you all enjoyed. Hopefully more than me because I was let down. Rich had fun. Rich always has fun unless I'm shitting on B-52s. With that being said, though, really hope you enjoyed. You have a great one. Bye.